Welcome back, everyone. We've had such a rich journey so far. Daily expressions, technology, environment, education. And today, we're stepping into something that I personally find endlessly fascinating: culture and society. This topic gives you so much room to express yourself, share perspectives, and use some genuinely beautiful language.
And I think what makes culture such an interesting IELTS topic is that there are no wrong answers. It's deeply personal, it's diverse, and every person brings something unique to the conversation.
Exactly. And that's actually a mindset shift worth having before your test. On culture questions, your personal experience is your greatest asset. So let's start there. Tell me, how would you describe the culture you grew up in?
That's a question I could talk about for hours, honestly. I grew up in a culture that places enormous value on family ties and collective well-being. Like, individual choices are always considered in the context of how they affect the wider community.
Collective well-being. What a strong phrase. It contrasts beautifully with individualism, which is another concept that comes up constantly in IELTS culture discussions. And family ties, meaning the bonds and connections within a family, is a natural, warm expression that sounds genuine rather than rehearsed.
And I think growing up in that environment gave me a deep sense of belonging, but sometimes it also meant that personal ambitions had to be balanced against family expectations.
A deep sense of belonging. That's emotionally resonant language, and IELTS examiners absolutely respond to that. It shows you can express abstract feelings precisely. And balanced against family expectations, that tension between individual and collective is a theme that runs through so many IELTS Part 3 discussions.
What about when questions shift to cultural change, like traditions being lost or globalization affecting local cultures?
This is where it gets really rich linguistically. Instead of saying old traditions are disappearing, try many indigenous cultural practices are gradually being eroded in the face of globalization. Eroded is such a powerful verb. It suggests slow, steady wearing away rather than sudden loss.
Indigenous cultural practices. That elevates the answer immediately. And in the face of globalization, using in the face of to mean despite the pressure of something, that's a really natural native expression.
And you can balance it with, at the same time, globalization has facilitated unprecedented cross-cultural exchange, exposing people to ideas and perspectives they'd never otherwise encounter.
Cross-cultural exchange and unprecedented, two phrases that work brilliantly together and facilitated instead of helped or allowed. Again, that verb elevation makes such a difference.
Now, what about cultural sensitivity? Because sometimes IELTS questions touch on cultural misunderstandings or navigating differences.
Oh, that's so relevant. I think the phrase cultural awareness gets used a lot, but a more sophisticated way to express it might be intercultural competence, actually being skilled in navigating across cultural differences, not just being aware they exist.
Brilliant distinction. Intercultural competence is a term from sociology and education. Using it signals genuine depth of knowledge, and it pairs well with, in an increasingly interconnected world, intercultural competence has become as essential as technical expertise.
Increasingly interconnected world. That's a phrase I hear native speakers use constantly when discussing globalization and culture.
And it's one of those anchor phrases we talked about in the education episode. Drop it in and it carries the rest of your sentence. You can apply it to technology, trade, politics, cultural exchange. It's endlessly versatile.
What about when questions ask you to compare your own culture with others? Because that can feel like a minefield. You don't want to sound judgmental.
Such an important point. The key is using comparative language that's observational rather than evaluative. Instead of Western culture is more liberal, say, there tends to be a greater emphasis on individual autonomy in many Western societies, whereas collectivist cultures often prioritize communal harmony.
Communal harmony, that's lovely. And the structure tends to be and often prioritize softens the generalization. It acknowledges that these are patterns, not absolute rules.
Exactly. Hedging language and cultural comparisons shows cultural sensitivity and linguistic sophistication at the same time. tends to, on the whole, generally speaking, in many cases, these qualifiers are your friends.
I also think talking about cultural festivals and traditions is a great way to personalize Part 2 answers, like describing a festival in vivid detail.
Absolutely. And the language of vivid description is worth practicing. Words like vibrant, deeply rooted, ceremonial, ritualistic, communal celebration, passed down through generations. These paint a picture and engage the examiner emotionally.
Passed down through generations. That phrase has such warmth to it. It immediately conveys continuity and heritage.
And heritage itself is a powerful word. Cultural heritage, intangible heritage, preserving heritage. The concept of preservation versus change is a golden thread running through almost every culture-related IELTS question.
So if you can speak fluently about that tension, preservation versus modernization, you've essentially got a framework for most culture questions.
That's a perfect way to think about it. Build a framework, populate it with rich vocabulary, and personalize it with genuine detail. That three-step approach works every time.
What about social issues that intersect with culture, like gender roles, social mobility, or generational differences? Because those come up in Part 3 a lot.
Great territory. For gender roles, attitudes towards gender roles have shifted dramatically over the past few decades, though deeply ingrained societal expectations still persist in many communities. Notice deeply ingrained, meaning so embedded it's hard to remove, and persist instead of continue to exist.
Deeply ingrained is just one of those phrases that just sounds right when you say it. It has a natural weight to it.
And for generational differences, there's a widening values gap between older and younger generations, particularly around issues of work-life balance, social responsibility, and digital culture.
Widening values gap. That's such a strong collocation, much more precise than older and younger people think differently.
Precision is everything. The difference between band 6 and band 7 is often not about how much you say, but how precisely you say it. One well-chosen phrase outweighs three vague sentences.
That's going to stick with me. Precision over quantity. Honestly, this episode has been my favorite so far.
Mine too. Culture just opens up such beautiful language. All right, let's go into our breakdown for episode 5.
Ready?
First, collective well-being, the health and happiness of a community as a whole, rather than just individuals, contrasts with individual autonomy, personal freedom to make one's own choices. Family ties, the emotional bonds and connections within a family, natural, warm, and genuine sounding. A deep sense of belonging, a strong emotional connection to a community or place, expressive and resonant language for culture topics. Eroded, gradually worn away, traditional values have been slowly eroded by modernization, far stronger than lost or disappeared. Indigenous cultural practices, traditions and customs native to a particular group or region, signals awareness and respect. Cross-cultural exchange, the sharing of ideas, values, and practices between different cultures, essential collocation for globalization discussions. Intercultural competence, the ability to navigate and communicate effectively across cultural differences, sophisticated sociological vocabulary. Increasingly interconnected world, anchor phrase for globalization topics, versatile across technology, culture, trade, and politics. Communal harmony, peaceful coexistence and cooperation within a community, pairs beautifully with collectivist culture discussions. Passed down through generations, transmitted from older to younger generations over time. Warm, vivid phrase for describing traditions. Deeply ingrained, so embedded in culture or behavior that it's very hard to change. Deeply ingrained social norms take generations to shift. Widening values gap, a growing difference in beliefs and priorities between groups, especially generations. Pronunciation tip. Indigenous, stress on the second syllable. Indigenous. Many students say indigenous, slow it down. Indigenous. Also, ceremonial, ceremonial. 4 syllables with stress on the third. Grammar note. Today we used contrast structures heavily, whereas, on the other hand, though, at the same time. In Part 3 culture discussions, contrast structures are your most powerful grammatical tool. They show you can hold two ideas simultaneously and reason between them, exactly what Band 7 and above requires. Practical IELTS tip. For culture and society topics, always prepare one vivid personal example, a festival, a family tradition, a community experience. Concrete personal detail transforms a generic answer into a memorable one. Examiners assess thousands of candidates. The ones who share specific, genuine details stand out every single time.
5 episodes in, and I feel like a completely different speaker. The confidence, the vocabulary, the frameworks, it all comes together.
And that's exactly the transformation this series is designed to create. We have 5 more episodes ahead. We're going into social issues, personal experiences, health and well being, work and career,